So far we have covered um, what are the different ways we can manage Azure, right? Using the different tools. So we can use the either use the Azure portal, or we could use the Azure PowerShell, Azure Cloud Shell, or the Azure CLI, right? And in terms of the results of the knowledge test, we found out that Azure Portal would be by far the easiest way in order to manage resources, because it has got GUI and tooltips to guide you, right, in order to do things. Um, so that's what you've learned so far. Um, in this module, we're going to learn about Azure Resource Manager. Okay, um, so this is so basically, to identify the features and use cases for Azure Resource Manager, meaning when we can use it, what are cases, scenarios where you can use it, describe each Azure Resource Manager component and its usage, organize it as Azure resources with resource groups, apply Azure Resource Manager locks, move Azure resources between groups, subscriptions, and regions, then remove resources and resource groups, and apply and track resource limits. Alright, so let's get started here. Alright, okay. Alright, so here is a scenario. Okay, your company is beginning to create resources in Azure. There is no organizational plan for standardizing the effort. There has been several instances when critical resources were inadvertently deleted, so it's difficult to determine who owns which resource. So basically, there is no plan, right? And people are creating resources, and no one knows who owns the resource. So that's the scenario that we are having, or given. So skills measure. So managing resources is part of the administrator, and this would give you the objectives, um, and alright, so you also have free sample questions. This is pretty new. I'd not seen this before. I think they just added it. I'm also going to link this site in the description, so this will help you schedule the exam and also um, cover the skills measured. Um, so um, okay, let's take a brief look at this. All right, so here are the types of questions that can come, and it's good to look at it um, once in a while, right? Um, to just get a general understanding of, because not only you need to prepare in terms of the content, right, for the exam, but also know what kind of questions are coming, because that is also a skill, right, in terms of answering questions. Um, so let's try to go back. Um, and we are also going through the modules here from Microsoft Learn. right? And let's look at the skills outline for a minute. All right, so it has so it's last updated 24th September, um, and right now we're looking at the prerequisites. All right, so basically, I'm going to link the site in the description. Okay, so and it's always good to peruse once in a while. Okay, manage identities and governance between 20%, configure VMs. Alright, so learning objectives in this module, learn how to, this is what you've seen, right? We've gone through this. So next unit, Azure, review Azure Resource Manager benefits. So this is, alright, let's go ahead. Alright, so the benefits. Okay, so the benefits of Azure Resource Manager are: you can deploy, manage, and monitor all the resources for your solution as a group rather than handling these resources individually. Um, so in case you're developing an app or or um, or implementing a solution, right? So you will need a lot of resources. You might need VMs, storage accounts, and whatnot. So you could probably use the Azure Resource Manager in helping you do this, right? Managing the whole thing rather than handling it individually. You can repeatedly deploy your solution throughout the development lifecycle and have confidence your resources are deployed in a consistent state, right? Because in terms of deployment, there are a lot of things that you need to take into account, right? And if you don't deploy everything, I mean, if you try to deploy it manually, you might miss out on some things, right? So this will help you manage your deployment and help you in, try and deploy it as many times as you want, and you'll know for a fact that it's consistent. You can manage your infrastructure through declarative templates rather than scripts. So declaring, uh, so uh, so you could have a template declaring what exactly you want, and then have it deployed. Um, I mean, in terms of management, you can also define a dependencies between resources so they are deployed in the correct order. Um, you can apply access control to all services in your resource group, because role-based access control is natively integrated into the management platform. You can apply tags to resources to logically organize all the resources in your subscription, and you can also clarify your organizational billing by viewing cost for a group of resources sharing the same tag, which follows the previous point in terms of why we are adding tags, right? Why are we applying tags to resources? Because we need to understand why we're doing things. Because if we don't understand it, we are not going to uh, get the concept, right? Why are we doing it? And it will also help finally, in acing the exam, because we need to know exactly why you're doing it, right? It's just not trying to memorize stuff, so to speak. Um, all right, so those are the benefits. So that's why I try to focus on this, because the page was talking about, or this particular unit was talking about Azure Resource Manager benefits. So, um, all right, let's just briefly go through these two sections on this page. So you're talking about reviewing this, right? So the infrastructure for your application is typically made up of many components. Maybe a virtual machine, storage account, virtual network, or a web app, database server. So it could have any different combinations or um, services or components that could make up your infrastructure. And these components are not separate entities. Instead, they are related and interdependent parts of a single entity. So even though you might see that they are or they look like separate components which are not interconnected, but they're actually interconnected. I mean, they are dependent on each other, and 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 they form a single entity. And you want to deploy, manage, and monitor them as a group. And that's why we're coming to a single theme of Azure Resource Manager, right? So um, Azure Resource Manager enables you to work with the resources in your solution as a group. So trying to manage everything as a cohesive unit, as a group, right? So not managing it individually. And we've seen why it's good to have it as a group, because it's obviously going to save you time. You're not looking at the minuscule or the granular details, right? You're looking at it as a component. I mean, looking at it as an overall solution, um, and um, even in terms of deployment, it's all gets managed. It'll you'll know for a fact that it maintains the same state no matter how many times you deploy it, right? Irrespective of that. So uh, and you can deploy, update, or delete all the resources for your solution in a single coordinated operation. Okay, this is also really important to know, right? It's not only about deploying. It can also talk about updating the resources or even deleting the resources. It all happens in a coordinated fashion. So you use a template for deployment, and that template can work for different environments such as testing, staging, and production. Azure Resource Manager provides security, auditing, and tagging features to help you manage your resources after deployment. So this in itself is another benefit, and I think that is explained here in terms of tagging, like logically organizing resources. And because of the tags, we can also um, filter those resources, if you will, by in billing, right? And um, and tagging features. So those are the benefits. And okay, so let's talk about consistent management layer. All right. So if you look at a screenshot here, you have the Azure Resource Manager, okay, which is component. Then you have the SDKs, software development kits, um, Azure Portal, and this is what we discussed in the last module about the different ways we can manage Azure. We could manage it through the portal, PowerShell, CLI, or the the Cloud App. And Cloud App is basically um, it helps you do or use PowerShell, through the browser, or you could also use the Azure CLI through the browser. So it helps facilitate that uh, activity. So all right. So then you have REST clients, authentication, and then you have the data store, web app, virtual machine. So you can see the arrows pointing down here. So this would mean that the Azure Resource Manager is helping you deploy, implement, manage, update all these things, right? So the data source, web app, virtual machines, service management, right? And we're talking about the portal, uh, REST clients. All right. So the PowerShell and CLI is pointing to the SDKs. All right. So the Azure Resource Manager provides a consistent management layer to perform tasks through Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, Azure Portal, REST APIs, and the client SDKs. So you can see all of them here, right? So you can see the PowerShell, CLI, um, REST clients, portal. So and all coming uh, and going through the resource manager. So the following image shows how all the tools interact with the same Azure Resource Manager API, and the API passes requests to the Azure Resource Manager service, and which authenticates and authorizes the request, right? The Azure Resource Manager service helps one to do that, and the Azure Resource Manager then routes the request to the appropriate resource provider, right? So let's look at the guidance here. So the following suggestions help you take full advantage of Azure Resource Manager when working with your solutions. So basically, we need to define and deploy your infrastructure through the declarative syntax in the Azure Resource Manager templates rather than using scripts or imperative commands. You can also define all deployment and configuration steps in the template, which you have talked about before. I mean, the Azure Resource Manager template, and you should have no manual steps for setting up your solution. So it's all automated through this deployment. Through the ARM template. It's also called the ARM template as an abbreviated version, right? ARM, the initials for each word, right? So um, run imperative commands to manage your resources, such as start or stop an app or machine. And you can also arrange resources with the same lifecycle in a resource group. Use tags for all other organizing of resources. So all right, so hopefully we've got an understanding of the benefits of uh, why it's good to use the Azure Resource Manager, right? Because it provides a consistent way to manage or deploy things using the ARM template, right? It's a declarative way of it's a declarative template, so you can declare things, declare and specify how you want it to be managed and deployed, right? You can also use tags. Um, uh, you can run imperative commands to manage your resources, stopping and starting a machine, all of those things, right? So, and obviously we'll dive deeper into this as we progress through these sections, right? So in the next video we will be going through um, we'll review Azure Resource uh, terminology. All right, so until then, see you next time.